Now, the effects of David Cameron's visit to Algeria may well be felt much longer than the duration of the visit itself, because no sooner had Mr. Cameron landed than he was off again, making a surprise visit to Libya. His impromptu tour of the Middle East hotspots seemed to drive home the idea that the United Kingdom is embarking upon a campaign of rapprochement with the Middle East.
But is this public gesture a wise move, or could Mr. Cameron one day find himself and the West supporting the wrong guys? Well, joining us now from Rome is the Franco-Algerian journalist and regular Monocle contributor, Nabila Ramdani. Nabila, thanks very much for joining us. We have seen these gestures of friendship towards Algeria by Western countries, especially Prime Minister David Cameron just a few days ago. Is there something that we need to be worried about, though?
Well, yes, indeed. I would certainly argue so. And I think that was reflected by the tone in the Algerian press itself. I mean, the Algerian government was very prompt to put out, the picture captured between of the two leaders. And they very much relished in the presence of David Cameron effectively visiting the country. It was a historical visit, I think, for both leaders and for both countries. And this could mark, in fact, a turning point, especially in the context of the Arab Spring, when we saw, dare I say, the ambiguous relationships, if not hypocritical, between Western governments and indeed dictators like Mubarak in Egypt or Ben Ali in Tunisia or even Libya's Gaddafi, when they were toppled. This very much exposed the hypocritical relationship that Western governments were having with such leaders. And now that Western governments have applauded the dawn of democracy in the wake of the Arab Spring in those countries, it seems that 2 years on, the strongman may be making a comeback, and that the visit by David Cameron to Algeria very much signified that.
How, though, do they resolve this enormous schism between the way that the West and the way that the Algerians in particular do business? The Algerians, as was demonstrated at the siege at the gas plant, acted unilaterally, autocratically and brutally in a way that the West perhaps would not do.
Well, absolutely. I think the Algerian approach to resolving the crisis on the gas plant very much showed Algeria's brutal pragmatism, which was criticized initially by Western governments drawn in the conflict, if I may put it that way, because of its citizens were effectively held hostage by the terrorists on the facility, and in particular David Cameron had very harsh words towards the Algerian government. But it seems that the visit by David Cameron was also aimed at mending any damage done to that relationship, because he realizes that British interests are immense in the country. Let's not forget that the terrorist attack, took place on the BP plant as well in the country, and Cameron's visit was very much reflects self-interested pragmatism, if I may put it in blunt terms. And although Cameron's very much put forward his intention to fight global terrorism, I think his visit very much meant that the problem of global terrorism might not be resolved, but he would very much discuss how to improve security around British facilities in the country.
And Nabila, tell us a bit about the relationship that Algeria's president Abdelaziz Bouteflika has with his people. He has been the man in charge for over 10 years. He is residing over an economy that is struggling. Youth unemployment is over 20%. There are serious issues with poverty. And he was also the man in charge during a 10-year internal conflict that killed more than 250,000 people. But yet it seems that his relationship with his people is that he's still generally accepted, and by all accounts, really, many people aren't in a rush to see him go.
Well, absolutely. I think Algerians Algeria's history point towards a paradox, really, because of all countries, you would expect Algerians to have chosen the path of revolutionary change in the context of the Arab Spring, and yet, surprisingly so, the Algerians chose slow political reform over turmoil, as witnessed in neighboring countries like Tunisia, Egypt, or indeed Libya. The Algerians are very much aware of Bouteflika's cynicism in how he ruthlessly rules the country with the support of the army, of course. But it's the recent history of the country, a war of independence which ended in 1962 with 1.5 million Algerians killed, and a murderous civil war with at least 250,000 people killed, that very much, it's, people who have suffered such unspeakable violence in living memory shied away, really, from sudden regime change, even when calls for regime change are generally rooted in democracy. And even though Bouteflika has been in power since 1999, the country chose slow reform, and the ploy of organizing parliamentary elections back in May 2010 very much worked, with 43% of Algeria's 37 million people taking part in the elections, aimed at bringing about gradual change rather than sudden radical change. But it has to be said as well that one of the reasons why Algeria didn't choose the path of revolutionary change is also because of the fear of the repressive security forces which were deployed when demonstrations took place at the end of 2010 and the beginning of 2011. So Algerian security forces are very much feared, and the president used other tactics like lifting a 19-year state of emergency, and he introduced what he called more representative democracies by allowing new parties to take part in the parliamentary elections. And he also introduced measures aimed at diffusing social anger by negotiating directly with food producers, for example, to lower the prices of basic food commodities. And that combined with a very fragmented opposition made up of groups with very various demands, made sure that Algeria remained remarkably stable during the Arab Spring.
But very briefly, if you may, Nabila, given the fact that Algeria is stable and, as you say, engaging in a very slow process of reform, what do you think we could find ourselves in a situation in 5 or 6 years' time whereby the British have backed the wrong regime and so find the opposition now in charge in Algeria? But secondly, given their increased involvement in a so-called war on terror, the United Kingdom could find itself open to that weakness that it experienced following the war in Afghanistan?
Well, I think the choice by David Cameron to openly and so transparently, visit Algeria, which is, to any observer, not a democratic state, is primarily due to the what the country has to offer, and its energy supplies have ensured bank reserves of some $200 billion in Algeria, though very few ordinary people are benefiting from that. But it's also oil reserves are massive, and it makes stability highly desirable for Western countries tapping in that immense wealth in terms of natural resources. And of course, it may well be that history will show again that Western governments are backing the wrong cause.
Nabila Ramdani, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. That was the Algerian French journalist Nabila Ramdani.